Hello, everyone, and welcome to Successful Aging. I am Dr. David Donohue, and it's my pleasure to be with you today. And what a journey we will be on, because it is a journey and life is a marathon, not a sprint. So we will travel the world and dig up all the insights we can on living our longest and best life. This first month, we will start with an overview of longevity, the science around it, how we can prevent disease and live our maximum life expectancy. And each month we're going to have an assignment of an encouraged activity that we recommend you go and do. And so this month we'll assign a strength and functional assessment. But each subsequent month throughout the entire year, we're going to cover some new topics in depth that'll give you the tools and the knowledge and the power to really have some agency over how long you get to live on this planet and how well you get to live on this planet. But think back to your first day. This is a day we all share in common. Our first day on this planet. When you were born into this earth, you took your first breath, your entire body was made up of brand new cells, free of damage, free of the aging process. And somehow fast forward to today, we have lived many of our days, and our bodies and our minds have changed considerably. And then I want you to think forward to that last day on this earth. It's another day that we will all share someday in the future when we will breathe our last breath. So you can think of your life expectancy, your whole life, as a timeline. So we start with our date of birth and we end with our date of death. And if you are a woman, then you can expect on average to be about age 80. And if you're a man, you can live to be about age 75. If we break down a typical average lifespan, we see we have about something like 20 years of childhood and education and generally good health. We enter the workforce usually in good health in our late teens or maybe in our 20s, but eventually we start to develop some of the chronic diseases. And then we typically retire around age 65, at which point we are sick for an average of about 10 to 15 years, and then we die. So I don't know who's signing up for that, but the reason I would say that is because 2/3 of people age 65 and up have 2 or more serious or life-threatening chronic diseases. So what I've described here, what I've pictured here, is literally the average lifespan for a person in the United States. And so I know a lot of you don't want that. We want something better than that. So let's dive deep into our overview of how can we change that equation. First off, I want to present to you lifestyle medicine. So lifestyle medicine is a technique in healthcare of treating and preventing chronic diseases by treating the root cause of those diseases, which time and again we find in the research relates to the lifestyle behaviors that we live. So the exciting, great news here is that we have a lot of control over whether we develop chronic diseases, whether we have a vibrant life well into our later years, or whether we live a life of more of disability. And it relates to how well we eat, whether we have a healthy nutrition. It relates to our physical activity, our relationship with stress and how much stress is a dominant force in our lives, the health of our relationships in our life, the quality and duration of our sleep, and the risky toxic substances that can take over our lives. Nutrition alone in the field of lifestyle medicine has so much power, so much science that speaks to the fact that diseases from head to toe are in large part a function of the food that we eat. And when we eat the Western diet as pictured on the left, we do suffer from much higher rates of these diseases that are listed from head to toe. Anything from Alzheimer's, dementia, and mental health conditions to diseases of the organs such as the lungs, liver, kidneys, gastrointestinal system, musculoskeletal system, all the way down to the feet, where gout, plantar fasciitis, neuropathy are all diseases of Western civilization. And when we shift to the healthier nutrition, we can experience improvement of many, many things, including feeling better, more energetic, and less pain. So nutrition alone is a powerful element of that healthy lifestyle. Ample research suggests that nutrition is not only the #1 risk factor for early death, both worldwide and in the United States, but if you look at the top 7, 5 of these factors are very much a function of the food that we're eating. So food ends up being a major contributor to early death and disability. So one of the things we highly recommend is to shift our food. That's like a gimme. Like, if you can just shift your food alone, you can add years to your life. So we recommend, as much as possible, moving your diet in the direction of these 6 food groups, where as much as possible, this is most of what you're eating throughout the day. And this includes the intact whole grains, the fruits, the nuts and seeds, the vegetables, the legumes, and mushrooms and fungi. So lifestyle medicine fits into our algorithm for successful aging in a key role. So I believe that the best approach to living our longest and best life starts with evidence-based medicine to diagnose and treat all those diseases that we might be developing. Along the way, we want to avoid being medicalized with too much medical care, polypharmacy, which is too many drugs, or polyspecialist, which is seeing too many specialists, and then moving to lifestyle medicine, which has the power of really treating and reversing whatever conditions, many of the conditions that we might develop, and along the way might boost our strength and mental and cognitive health and metabolic health and vascular health. And then finally, there's this science of health span and longevity science. And this is a relatively emerging field, but it turns out that beyond those pillars of lifestyle medicine, those 6 categories of behaviors, there is a lot of science saying, my goodness, we can extend life expectancy even beyond what we had previously hoped. And many people have been familiar with this book by Peter Attia called Outlive. And he's one of a series of authors who have come forward and said, there is real science there. There is the real opportunity for us to extend the human life expectancy. And what's more, Dr. Attia is an advocate of moving from what he calls medicine 2.0 to medicine 3.0, in which we become more proactive. We have a longevity strategy. We don't assume that we're just going to live forever. We have to have a very deliberate strategy of how are we going to extend that life expectancy. Dr. Attia is a believer in extensive testing and a very personalized approach, and he's a huge believer in strength and endurance, which will be a focus today. Dr. Attia, this is one of his graphics. He advocates for trying to, what he calls, square the longevity curve. So if this is a longevity curve where as we age, we start to decline functionally and we become less and less functional, and we hit a period of disability, and then we pass away at a premature age. And he would argue medicine 2.0 doesn't really engage much until you're very late in the disease process. And then it extends life expectancy a little bit at a time when we have already functionally declined significantly. So with medicine 3.0, we're more aggressive. We slow that aging process in the first place. We're all going to die, but we're going to die a little later with medicine 3.0, and we're going to die with less disability through most of our years. And so this squaring of the longevity curve buys us an extra decade or even 2 decades. And that's what Dr. Attia believes is what we can really hope for. Another important author who is emerging on the scene is none other than our Dr. Michael Greger, with his new book coming out in December of 2023 called How Not to Age. This is an exciting trove of information with 13,000 scientific references, and it heavily researched on the power that we have over premature death and the aging process. Just to give one snippet of the massive amount of information in this book is this table, in which Dr. Greger enumerates the 11 aging pathways. These are pathways by which the cells of our body will age. And he and then the columns of this table tell you, well, what kinds of behaviors do we have that can move the dial, that can improve each of these pathways of aging. So exercise, for example, addresses most of those 11. Protein restriction addresses all 11. And increasing in healthy plant foods addresses almost all of the 11. So, in his book digs deep into all the details. So if we look at that cellular level, what results from aging at the cellular level is that we accumulate a lot of these so-called senescent cells, these aged cells. They're also called zombie cells. They're cells that really should turn over and be replaced by healthy, fresh cells, fresh out of our stem cell supply. But unfortunately, as we age, we tend to accumulate senescent cells, and this leads to dysfunction in so many areas. Everything from atherosclerosis and cancer to dysfunction of our immune system, liver fibrosis, heart disease. So we're going to focus today on mainly autophagy. So autophagy is one of those 11 pathways. And what is autophagy? Well, as these normal cells become senescent cells and become less functional, and they secrete these so-called inflammatory cytokines, which do damage throughout the body. What we want to do is we want to get rid of these senescent cells. So autophagy means getting rid of these senescent cells. It means self-eating, or eating away at the dead wood, if you will. So another important book in this field is called The Longevity Diet by Dr. Walter Longo. And he offers a powerful way of taking care of these senescent cells and inducing this process of autophagy. And it is through a controlled method of fasting he calls the fasting mimicking diet. Fasting turns out to be a very powerful tool for living a longer life. And I guess that comes as the sad news for many of us, because not everybody wants to fast. But it's also exciting news because it really has a powerful effect. It usually takes more than a day of fasting, however. So Dr. Longo has invented an approach to fasting called the fasting mimicking diet, in which you do eat food. You eat the food that's in one of these boxes in a given day. And it's not a lot of calories, so it's not a pleasant fast, but it is less debilitating than a water-only fast, and you still get many of the benefits, including the autophagy. So at the end of 5 days, you have completed a fast, you have induced a lot of autophagy in your body, and it has a very rejuvenating effect. And what we see in the research on this approach is that, in fact, we do see lowering of blood pressure on a sustained basis months after doing 3 cycles of this modified fast. You see lowering of IGF-1, which is a marker for tumor cell growth. We see total cholesterol improving. And interestingly, we see C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation, normalizing in the majority of people who go through this diet. But good news, we can also potentially induce autophagy by a couple other ways. And one of them is this superfood, which is an outlier. It is the most powerful superfood in mice, and it is called spermidine. So spermidine is basically a food ingredient, as we'll discuss in a moment, but there is clinical evidence that it improves memory function, enhances the growth of hairs in our body, reduces cardiovascular mortality, improves the function of our blood vessels, reduces cancer, and has even a lot more benefits as measured in mice and other rodents. Spermidine, where does it come from? Another page from Dr. Greger's book. Number 1 source, tempeh, mushrooms, and wheat germ. Wheat germ per tablespoon, you get about 2.5 milligrams. The goal for spermidine, eat about 20 milligrams a day. So tempeh mushrooms are good. If you're into pig pancreas, well, here's some good news for you. But mostly we're looking at a lot of legumes, a lot of soy products, soy milk, soybeans. Fortunately, lettuce is on the list. Polenta and corn, and lentils and wheat germ are and chickpeas and broccoli. Broccoli makes every list of healthy foods. So there's your spermidine. There's a way of inducing autophagy that's a lot less painful than fasting. So try to get your daily tempeh, mushrooms, and wheat germ. Now, wheat germ is inactivated by cooking, so try to eat it raw. The spermidine can be inactivated by high temperature cooking. So on that note, here's another source of autophagy, and it is coffee. Coffee causes autophagy, but not if it's brewed in this manner in a French press. So it turns out you need to filter out the acrylamide, which impairs autophagy. It gets complex, this whole field of nutrition science. It's an exciting, interesting world. We're going to talk briefly about glycation, because glycation is another cause of cellular aging. What do I mean by glycation? Glucose, too much blood sugar in our body, and we can form this substance called advanced glycation end products. Advanced glycation end products are basically glucose sticking to every kind of biochemical in your body and causing them to dysfunction and causing this array of diseases, everything from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and stroke to lung diseases and fibrosis, liver fibrosis, chronic kidney disease, rheumatoid arthritis, the list goes on. So we don't want to form these advanced glycation end products. And the main way of doing that is to avoid getting diabetes, or even avoid having any higher blood sugar level than you need. So how does the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists recommend that we avoid diabetes? We want to do lifestyle modification, avoid excess weight gain. We want to eat a plant-based diet, they recommend. They recommend plenty of exercise. It's the same pillars of lifestyle medicine: solid 7+ hours of sleep a night. This is the way to avoid type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Our number one drug for diabetes, called metformin, lowers the blood sugar, but doesn't lower it too much. And it turns out that there's evidence that it might actually extend life expectancy even in people without diabetes. They call it a geroprotective effect. And it has been found to be associated with lower rates of cancer, lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of all-cause mortality. So people live longer when they take metformin. There is a tool you can use called continuous glucose monitoring, which can be a powerful tool. And one of the months in this program, we will focus on metabolic health, and we will offer the opportunity to make use of at least a couple weeks of continuous glucose monitoring to learn what foods raise my blood sugar and what foods do not. But also, we can get those advanced glycation end products in the food we eat. So some food has AGEs in it. For example, caramel color. Anytime you take sugar and brown it, you form these advanced glycation end products that are going to cause a lot of damage, and they are going to cause cellular aging in your body. So avoid anything with caramel coloration, and avoid any foods that are high in AGEs, including, look at this, roasted barbecued chicken thighs with skin, 16,000 units, far, far higher than most of the other foods. But grilled hot dogs, very high on the list. Anytime you're cooking meat at a high temperature, especially in the presence of sugar, you are forming a lot of AGEs. You are aging your body prematurely. Sausage, but even broiled tofu is pretty high. So this is the highest of the plant-based sources, much lower than the animal, but still pretty high. So when we cook things at a lower temperature, certainly when we eat them raw, when we eat more plant-based, we get way, way down. Oatmeal has hardly any advanced glycation end products. A roasted yam is very low, and a boiled is even lower. So eat your boiled sweet potatoes is always my suggestion. Let's talk briefly about inflammation. That's everybody's bugaboo for aging and disease. We want to reduce the inflammation in our body. How can we do that? Eat the rainbow. When you're eating those colorful fruits and vegetables, and I'm not talking about Skittles, I'm talking about fruits and vegetables, it reduces inflammation. It helps you live longer. Here's some interesting evidence showing that when people eat a more plant-based diet, even starting later in life, like at around age 60, they can extend their life expectancy by as much as 8 years in women and 9 years in men. So switching to a healthier diet even later in life can be a powerful exercise. Which kinds of switches were the most impactful? Going from someone who doesn't eat legumes to someone who eats about a cup a day of legumes, boosted life expectancy by something like 2 years on average. Whole grains were powerful. Nuts were pretty powerful. Fish was the best of the meats, followed by fruits and vegetables. But when we get away from the eggs, when we go from eating more eggs to less eggs, we extend life expectancy. When we get away from the refined grains, when we get away from sugar, red meat, and processed meat, all these things extend life when you stop those unhealthier foods. As we discussed, for inflammation, the prolonged fasting mimicking diet had a powerful effect, lowering that C-reactive protein, one of the few interventions we have to reduce total body inflammation on a reliable basis. But let's talk about the organs of our body, because another way that we can measure the reduction in aging is by looking at the organs of our body. We can measure effectively the age of our lungs, our heart, our muscle, our brain. And so this brings us to one of our guiding principles. We firmly believe if we can measure it, we can improve it. So example would be these folks who have the kyphotic curved spine that comes with aging. And this didn't happen overnight. It happened on a very gradual basis, but nobody really looked into it. Nobody gave the advice of you're getting weak in your bones and in your muscles of your back, and we need to strengthen that back. So nobody measured it. It didn't improve, and it got worse and worse. So that's why we say, let's measure stuff. So at the organ level, we have a lot of tools to measure aging at just about any organ. Some of these are more standard medical tests. Some of these are a little bit more advanced. And then on top of that, we have the ability to then improve aging at the organ level using a variety of modalities. Again, a lot of it lifestyle related, some of it related to a little bit more advanced longevity science stuff. Let's start with the brain. We're going to talk about 3 organs, the brain first. Alzheimer's disease, the numbers are staggering. The number of people with Alzheimer's has doubled in the last 20 years, more than doubled, and it's expected to almost double again in the next 20 years. So this is just a growing problem. How can we measure the aging of our brain? How can we improve it? So let's talk about lifestyle. Lifestyle plays a big role in whether we develop Alzheimer's or not. When we eat the healthy nutrition with lots of the colorful rainbow colored fruits and vegetables, when we get the strength training and the aerobic training that we need, when we get the 8 hours of sleep, mindfulness, meditation, a healthy relationship with stress, stay connected with people in loving and caring relationships, and finally, complex cognitive work. All those ingredients have the power to preserve that brain over time. But unfortunately, the influences of our society are kind of on the opposite side. And so a lot of what people do, sitting in front of the TV and eating unhealthy foods, not getting enough sleep, chronic stress, all these things drive us towards Alzheimer's disease. So again, we have a lot of power. But quick item on how can we take our brain to the next level. Well, remember spermidine that we talked about earlier? Here was a randomized trial in humans in which they found that supplementing with 3 milligrams of spermidine per day, this is after cooking, boosted the memory score by 2.3 points, which is a powerful effect. We don't have any medication that can achieve this. This is a small study. It hasn't been repeated, but it is tantalizing. And we know that spermidine is awfully safe to consume. And in this study, the study subjects were given a wheat germ that was, unbeknownst to them, was baked into their biscuit. So maybe we should do the same thing. Keep in mind that you lose about 2/3 of your spermidine when you cook it. So there's a couple of 2 or 3 tablespoons a day of wheat germ if you can. Try to eat mushrooms every day. Let's talk about aging and the blood vessels in the heart. So our heart disease has been described as a toothless paper tiger that need not exist. It's our leading killer, but it could be almost totally prevented. Lifestyle plays a huge role in whether we develop heart disease and get the atherosclerosis and the heart attacks and the stents and congestive heart failure. And when we're able to eat a similar healthy diet and live a similar healthy lifestyle as for the brain, that's when we have the power of preventing and even reversing heart disease if we take a big enough dose of healthy lifestyle. So one of the things we'll do in the course of this program is to offer advanced heart labs. These blood tests are generally not expensive, usually covered by insurance, and very powerful and very actionable. And also certain kinds of testing, which has been around for a good long time, has very robust science and can give us a lot of useful information about how much of the dangerous inflammatory soft plaque is present, or how much hard plaque, where is the plaque in your heart, how much risk do you face? And again, lots we can do to reverse these things. We're going to talk about one more organ, which is the muscle. Muscle is critical to how long we get to live and how well we get to live. There's this process called sarcopenia, where every muscle in your body tends to shrink over time, tends to regress and get replaced with fat. We tend to lose muscle and gain fat with age. So you can see the normal muscle on the left, and as we've aged, we've developed more sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass. There's just less muscle there in that thigh muscle later on in life. And then what it gets to the point is frailty. And so frailty is largely another avoidable disease if we get on it early enough and if we do the right things. We can measure frailty much like we can measure heart health and everything else. This 9-point scale is an interesting one where you can see where you are on the scale. You might be very fit, you might be well, you might be managing well, or a little bit vulnerable, needing a cane. And then we get to the point of walkers and so forth. So trying to keep yourself in closer to number 1 or 2 is going to serve you well in life. Because as we age, as Dr. Attia has warned us, we tend to decline. We start to lose muscle mass starting at a pretty young age, somewhere around 30. And the question is, are we going to lose that muscle mass rapidly and hit disability relatively young in life, or are we going to slow that curve down? Are we going to maintain our muscle mass over time? And so I think that's the goal. The good news is we can do it. We have absolute power in most of us over how rapidly this loss of muscle mass is going to play out in our lives. But when we're able to slow it down, we're able to get through our entire life without disability, which is kind of what everybody wants. So there's science on pedometer steps. Let's talk about one way of maintaining your thigh muscle strength is to use those legs throughout the day, all day, with lots of walking. And it's interesting that the more steps people take, the lower is their death rate. And it's a pretty strong effect. People who take about 2,000 steps a day have something like 4 times the death rate compared to people who take 10,000 steps a day. And that's after controlling for a whole long list of things, including age, diet quality, sex, race, ethnicity, body mass index, education, alcohol consumption, smoking status, diabetes, stroke, coronary disease, heart failure, cancer, chronic bronchitis and emphysema, mobility limitation, and self-reported general health. After controlling for all that, even then you have this powerful effect from the number of steps you take every day. So we're trying to give you a lot of tidbits of information each month that you can use, and this is one of them. Try to prioritize pedometer steps. Try to prioritize squatting, one of the most important exercises you can do. And I challenge you to start doing squatting on a daily basis. In fact, let's go ahead and do a squatting exercise, which is called the sit to stand test, over 30 seconds. So I'm going to ask you to get up from the comfort of your chair and start doing squats for the next 30 seconds. Ready, set, and begin. Do it just like this young lady is doing it. I am timing you. Count your squats as you go. Keep squatting. You want to touch your bottom to the chair and stand all the way up without using your hands to assist you. That's 15 seconds. Go as fast as you can. And stop. That is 30 seconds. So here you see the average for people age 60 to 95, the average number of squats that people were able to do. Okay, so if you find yourself in your age bracket, great, but I challenge you to get even more squats. The more you can do, the stronger your legs are, the more you're going to be able to function as we get older. Strength training is critical. In medicine, we don't give it enough justice. It is the answer to things like frailty, even incontinence. Squeezing those pelvic muscles has a powerful way of preventing incontinence. Injuries. People say, I can't exercise because I'm injured. I'm always injured. Exercise is the answer to injury. So if you're not exercising because of injury, then you're in a vicious cycle. We got to get out of it. So strengthen those muscles around the injured joint, especially the tendons. Strength is the answer in many cases to chronic pain, to fall risk, and even to fractures. It turns out bone strength is about 15% of the explanation for hip fractures, and muscle strength is much more than that. So if we want to avoid hip fractures and falls, we want to get stronger. A lot of people are intimidated by the gym. It's young people, it's muscle shirts, and it's AC/DC playing, right? But it turns out that there's ways of doing the gym in a manageable way that doesn't require that much time. And so I want to introduce to you another important book called Body by Science. We're going to talk more about this next month, but a real interesting science-based book that espouses an approach to strength training that is quick and easy. They recommend 5 core exercises, the ones pictured here, and they recommend doing 1 set of each exercise to failure at a super slow tempo of 10 to 30 seconds up, 10 to 30 seconds down. So real slow and no lockout. So you're not resting at any point in the exercise, and you're going for time under load. You're going for 90 to 120 seconds of time under load, and push it to the point of muscle fatigue, to muscle failure, when you cannot go any farther. Your muscles will be trembling. That's when you're taking your muscles to failure. And that's the signal that's going to tell your muscles, grow for the next week. And then the rest of your job for the week is to just recover. So with just 1 exercise session a week, you can get a lot of strength gain over time. Another book that advocates this approach is called Deep Fitness. I like this book. They recommend what they call mindful strength training to failure, in which they add a mindfulness component to it, which is fascinating. So I encourage either of those 2 books. So your assignment, and each month we're going to assign you a task. Number 1 is I recommend you find yourself an exercise physiologist and get a functional and strength assessment by that person. They can measure a powerful set of tools, including hand grip strength, which is an important determinant of life expectancy and even dementia risk. They can test your balance, your leg muscle strength. They can check your cardiorespiratory fitness, your ability to perform activities of daily living. And they can do tests like the sitting rising test, which measures how strong or weak are you from getting onto the ground and getting up from the ground as we get older. So, and they can give you a customized exercise prescription. So an extra credit assignment would be to read the book Deep Fitness and start yourself doing their mindful strength training to failure once a week. Assignment number 2, and because nutrition is so powerful, I think it's important that we get started on this. So I recommend try to eat a mostly plant-based diet for the next month. A great app that's free is called The Daily Dozen by Dr. Greger, and it's a simple checklist to make sure that you're checking off some of the healthiest foods every single day. And he has said that if he should have made a daily baker's dozen and should have included mushrooms in this list. So I would add mushrooms to this list, but otherwise a great checklist of the foods you want to eat. You can find easy prepared meals by a number of online services. Locally here in Delaware, we have justtasteandsee.com. Food prepared for you. So there are services out there who will, at a price, will prepare food for you and make it dead easy. So now, with all that said, and the power of nutrition, there is something missing here. And what is it in these wonderful 6 food groups of plant-based nutrition? Well, it is potentially the power of supplements to add to the nutrition that you're getting through your food. This was a recent study done by and published in the American Journal of Cardiology, Journal of the American College of Cardiology, in which they looked at over 40 different nutrients and looked at all the evidence and tried to find out which supplements might reduce our risk of heart disease and which supplements might make us live longer. And only one was found to reduce mortality, all-cause mortality, and that was coenzyme Q10. So assignment number 3 is get started taking a healthy set of supplements. I mean, everybody should be on B12 once a day. Vitamin D3 is a little more controversial, but I think the evidence really supports taking about 2,000 to 5,000 international units a day. Um, there's emerging research that algae, DHA, and EPA, omega-3 can be heart healthy. Coenzyme Q10, as we talked about, and as we'll talk about in a future session, creatine monohydrate, very safe, very healthy, and does boost muscle growth. So there's my list of supplements. So looking ahead to your last day on this planet, when will it occur? Well, as we said, this is the average life expectancy, the average timeline is not appealing to most of us. We don't want to retire, have 10 years of sickness, and then die. Instead, we want to extend that. So if we were to just layer in that healthy lifestyle, we have the power of adding a good 10 years onto your life expectancy, and 10 good years at that, where you're highly functional, and shrink that time in which you're sick and disabled. But if we were to layer in some of this longevity science that we talked about, I think that there's the potential of another 10 years. And we didn't cover every modality, and my goodness, we will go much deeper into a lot of the different areas of science in the coming months. But I think there's the potential of extending that life expectancy, extending that health span, so that we're functional and happy and well into our 80s, and the period of sickness is even further compressed. So, looking back to that young, youthful self of yours, keep in mind that a lot of that youth is still inside of you. Those stem cells need to be replenished. We need to induce autophagy. We need to reduce the inflammation, the glycation. And we have a lot of agency on how well we're going to live the rest of your life. So let's put together your longevity strategy. So I encourage you to get out a pen and paper and maybe a note card and write down what it is you're going to do. I gave you some assignments. Here they are. I encourage you to think about, can I really work this into my life? What's my plan? Make a strategy about how you're going to extend this life expectancy of yours, because if you don't make a strategy, it's likely to not happen. And with that, I wish you every success in the coming month.